And we are live. Welcome, everyone, once again to the spoiler room. It is that time once again. Thank you for venturing down the stairs, pulling up a chair, grabbing your favorite drink. Tonight, I have not your father's root beer.
And I have my own actual brewed coffee.
Yeah, coffee. We'll put that in quotes. He's got something other than coffee in there, maybe.
No, I'm lame. It's just coffee. It's black coffee, too. That makes me tough. Well, I can't be lame. I'm tough.
I was going to say that makes you tough if you drink black coffee. But thank you, everyone, once again for joining us as we are in full force month. Yes, November is full force month here. We've been covering some interesting films with the title of Force in that title. And tonight, I decided to set the Wayback Machine to 1978 because here in the spoiler room, no film is immune to possibly getting the spoiler room treatment. And tonight, to help me look at this classic film, is none other than my right-hand man, the man who just keeps coming back for more. It is none other than Ian Simmons. Hello, Ian. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. A little disappointed that we're not talking about The Force Awakens. You couldn't have worked a Star Wars movie in there.
We did an episode on The Force Awakens when it came out.
You can never do too many on The Force Awakens.
Go. Some people would disagree with you, especially after the conversation we just had in the after hours, which if you want to check that out, folks, yes, we have a Patreon, hashtag license to shill. Check out our Patreon if you want to hear our pre-show BSing going on. But tonight,
a mashup of Star Wars and Ghostbusters talk. You don't want to miss it.
No, you don't want to miss it, and I'm sure it'll have you screaming at your whatever audio device you listen to us on as well. And tonight, 1978, yes, folks, it is Force 10 from Navarone. And Mr. Ian Simmons, as always, you do such a good job with these. Could you give a synopsis of Force 10 from Navarone? You could just read from IMDb. I wouldn't. That's,
well, I have IMDb pulled up here. During World War II, several oddly assorted military experts are teamed in a mission to raid and destroy a bridge vital to enemy strategy. Thank God. Because I got all my history and geography and probably even math from the movies. So when it comes to like, oh yeah, this is the very important battle in this country, and this is what it meant. There's a helpful opening kind of narration about the significance of this bridge and, Navarone. And there's all these like, I'm going to butcher this. So essentially there's a territory with this dam and this bridge that the Nazis are getting their supplies, and it basically gives them a stranglehold in the area. And so the Allied forces are trying to take out this bridge. There is a ragtag group of, I think, mostly Americans. They're led by Harrison Ford. I don't know what's going on with this group, but they're trying to.
It's an allied group, but usually when the British said Allied, they meant Americans or French or someone other than British.
Right. And Harrison Ford is pretty much the main guy who talks out of that group for as long as they're around. Again, spoilers. But they're getting ready to go into enemy territory. And Robert Shaw and this other guy get tasked to tag along with them to assassinate a spy named Nikolai. They get shot down, get dropped, I guess, behind enemy lines, and they have to fight their way through the countryside, through, people posing as Russians, actual Russians, people who are spies posing as Russians, Nazi sympathizers. There's so much crossing and double crossing and triple crossing. I mean, this movie is an absolute mess in terms of like trying to keep track who's on whose side. I think everyone just ends up on the same side eventually because they're just so busy screwing each other over. But I loved this movie. It's amazing. And I don't know why more people don't talk about it.
Now, what this actually is, if you don't mind me just rolling back a bit here, Ian, is...
And correct me, please. I probably got all of that wrong.
No. And mad proud. And I am not saying I know anything more, but with the opening, that opening about the island, that was actually Navarone. This is Force 10 from Navarone. So this is like supposed to be somewhat a continuation of the movie, because there was the Guns of Navarone, which was the island with the impenetrable guns that was
Is this a
causing the
sequel to
mission.
that?
So this is, I believe, and I feel bad, folks, I have not looked up beforehand, but I believe this isn't, yes, because this is intended to be a sequel to it, to Guns of Navarone. Originally, the character Miller, played by Edward Fox, and Robert Shaw's character, I love Robert Shaw, as Mallory, are actually supposed to be the characters from Guns of the Navarone, who were originally played by Gregory Peck and David Nevin. David
Wow.
Nevin played Anthony Miller, John Anthony Miller, and Gregory Peck played Captain Keith Mallory. And so Mallory and Miller in this one are the same Mallory and Miller from Guns of the Navarone.
See, the thing is, like, I had heard of Guns of Navarone,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't know that these were connected. I did no research, so I thought that maybe it was just another movie about the same island, you know, because they do
Right.
movies about World War II battles
yeah.
and stuff all the time that aren't really connected. So I didn't know there. Now I want to go watch Guns of Navarone.
Yeah.
In
I
fact,
guess...
let's just come back next week and we'll pause this and just Thanks everybody. Wait, it's not my show. Never mind. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, it even says in IMDb the film was originally to have been made in 1967, but it got held up. In 1967, and Gregory Peck and Anthony Quinn and David Nevin were going to reprise their roles, which would make more sense. However, the time the film was eventually made, it was decided that they were too old for the sequel. They were even considered too old by some critics in the original film.
How old were they? Because Robert Shaw was not a spring
well, no,
chicken.
but the originals, the original cast, Gregory Peck, Anthony Quinn, and David Nevin, they were cripes when the Guns of the Navarone came out, which was in it was 1961. So Anthony Quinn was already 46.
Oh my god. No.
30, no, yeah, 40. Yeah, if my math is correct.
I don't know.
61.
I know nothing about history, but
yeah, 40.
Like
40.
when I look at Robert Shaw and the guy who played Miller, whatever his name
Right.
is, Edward Fox,
Mhm.
I don't think, oh my god, they're too old to be playing these parts. I just thought, oh, they're just older military guys.
Right. I thought
Because
they were
kind of at the beginning, they're kind of like they're walking around the base and they get pulled back in to this mission. Like, you're kidding me? We don't even do that anymore. So it's like, I feel like you could have you could have even older actors. It still doesn't matter.
you could have older actors in here. So it would have been interesting to see them get the originals, but that's why this film opens the way it does, because it's meant to be a carryover from the Guns of Navarone, which I remember now when I watched the opening sequence of this, I'm like, that kind of looked familiar, because it's been a long time since I saw the original Guns of Navarone, but I'm like, they look familiar, and that's why they had these two guys on the deck of the destroyer that got them, because they're supposed to be those original characters, only older now, and
See,
but not that old, because it's only supposed to be like a couple, like not even a year later or something like that from when they...
See, it's a problem that I start watching these movies at 4:00 in the morning, because I'm just like getting my coffee and getting awake. I thought it was one of those movies where they have that kind of introductory thing that's not set up, but it's sort of an encapsulation of what you're about to watch.
Oh, right. No, and that's the way it seems. That's the way it comes off. But no, that's actually supposed to be showing the end of the Guns of Navarone. And so Force 10 from Navarone is a continuation of that. This is the Due Force, which, I love this movie too. Watching this, I'm like, oh my God, so many familiar faces. It's brought to you, hold on to your butts, folks, brought to you by the same director who brought you Remo Williams' The Adventure Begins, which we did talk about a few months ago on this very podcast. Which
That's why it's awesome.
Blows my mind. But I dug this film too. I mean, from when you're introduced to the Miller and Mallory characters who are sent on a secret mission to a young Harrison Ford who, you know, just coming off of Han Solo. I mean, this is 78. So I mean, he filmed this. He must have filmed this like right after. And I apologize, folks. I did not look up everything for trivia for this, which I'm sure which there is plenty of because it's an older film. But yeah, he had to fresh off of Star Wars.
And it's weird because he doesn't play a Han Solo character. He's a bit more buttoned up, except for when he has to show a bit of menace. We do get a couple of those classic Harrison Ford finger points. He's so masterful at that. But yeah, this is like before he was Harrison Ford, but watching this movie, you could totally see, he's destined to become that guy.
Oh yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, this has got a lot of really solid performers in it. I mean, Robert Shaw, everybody's used to him from Jaws. You don't even realize it's Robert Shaw, really, even look at, because his hair is cut differently until you get the one scene. There's a scene later on, folks, where they're being chased by guys in bandage faces. They've fallen behind enemy lines. Things have gone wrong, as you can imagine, with the mission. And there's this one scene, though, with Shaw and Harrison Ford, and Shaw delivers a line or two directly to the Harrison Ford character that sounds like Quint. And then you see it, and you're just like, next time you be the corpse. The way he said that, I was just like, that's Quint. There he is right there.
Well, it's also weird because he's got this British accent. I mean, this is only the third, I think, Robert Shaw movie I've seen. Sure. Jaws, From Russia with Love, and then this. He's great in it. But I guess it makes sense that this is a continuation, because I didn't know what this movie was. I thought it was just going to be a straightforward kind of war film, and I wonder about Guns of Navarone if it's this cheeky. I mean, it's like it's almost a war comedy drama, because all these and in fairness, there's a lot of these kind of ensemble war movies that I've not seen, like Kelly's Heroes. I think I may have watched with my dad when I was too young to remember, but so it is kind of an archetype or a genre in and of itself. But man, it really works here, especially with at the very end of the film, you've got Carl Weathers and Edward Fox together. They've kind of had this like distrust kind of relationship, because Carl Weathers is the one, black member of this group, and he's being carted away by the military police when they come across Harrison Ford's Barnsby character and his group, getting ready to, pretty much steal a plane to go on their mission. And then Carl Weathers gets tags along and ends up being a part of this crew. And there's a lot of distrust because of the racial issues and all that. But by the end of the movie, he and Miller are such good friends that I swear they're about to make out. And it's just so lovely to watch.
It is for a film like this, I mean, and yeah, they work a number of, current modern hot topics into this film, race being one of them, because he's called a not so pleasant name by the British MPs when they stop him. And then he kind of forces his way into this group, onto this mission. And then when they meet what are supposed to be the partisans, who they find out later, dun, 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 aren't, because they hadn't seen James Bond and realized Richard Kiel was Jaws and a bad guy at one point. So seeing him, he looks like a good guy. Sure. They deal with racism again, because we're talking Germany and Yugoslavia and very prevalent still, unfortunately, even today in some areas, but definitely back then. So they give him a hard time, calling him another name in this film, and addressing race again in this movie. And even later on, then it comes up again after they there's a rescue mission to rescue Weaver, who is Carl Weathers' character, and Miller, who's the explosive expert, they even have this scene, this wonderful scene where they're driving this truck. They're being chased by Richard Keel's group, which his character's name is Drazak. They're chasing him, and he refuses to start the truck because he's like, you didn't come back for my, basically, you didn't come back for my black ass. He's like, you came back for the, the explosive guy, and I just happened to be there. He's like, you've left me at every turn. I mean, that comes up throughout this movie, and it surprised me, that they took on that issue.
Well, but what's interesting about that particular issue is Carl Weathers made it, his character Weaver, and understandably so, given that, they're not even talking about the 60s. We're talking about the, something that took place in the 1940s.
Oh yeah, 1940s. Yeah, the movie.
Period, yeah. Right. Yeah. So he's got a big chip on his shoulder about race, and for a good reason. But when he is giving that speech and he's like, you were going to come back for the white guy, essentially. And Barnsby, Harrison Ford's character, says, yeah, he wasn't necessarily talking about race. He was talking about strategy. It's not like if there had been, two white guys, they would have like moved heaven and earth to get them, or if there had been two black guys who were like, no, if one of those black guys had been the explosive expert, they would have gone back for them, because that's the whole point of them being out there, is to blow up the damn bridge. But the other, racially charged moment is in that initial meeting with Richard Keel's Drazak character, before anybody realizes that they're, traitorous scum. They meet this little group, and Carl Weathers is there, and, there's some like knife play, but Richard Keel comes up and grabs Carl Weathers' face and starts like wiping his hand on it, and then showing his hand to the people, behind him. It just made me wonder. It's a gross moment, but also perhaps one of genuine cultural curiosity. They may have heard of black people before. I don't know if they'd ever seen black people before. So they could be like, wait, are you serious? You're telling me there are people who don't actually look like us? It doesn't rub off. It's not paint. Yeah, it's shocking to watch in 2021, and it's not tasteful in any era, but you can almost see from a story perspective these people like treating him like an alien because they can't believe what they're seeing.
Yeah, and I can totally see that, and I think that's what they were kind of trying to allude to, was that these are local yokels, pardon my, but basically they are in the middle of Slavia, sheep farmers. Basically they aren't worldly. Their entire world has been probably until the war came along. The majority of their reality has been their bubble of fields in their area. So like you said, they may not have seen those who don't look like themselves ever, like that drastic of a difference. My great grandmother came directly from Yugoslavia, and my mom told me that she had never seen a black person on the street before, and the first time she saw them, because the only time she's ever saw the portrayal of a person of color was in books talking about the devil.
Well, that would do it.
Wow. I'm just, and
no,
I'm bringing it up, and it's wrong. No, it's fully wrong, but I'm just saying that is, I think, the perspective they were trying to go for here. But yeah, 2020 in any lens, it's still wrong the way Drazak treats Weaver. Absolutely. But at the same time, you look at what their culture is and not forgiving it, but understanding why they may have reacted the way they had. It's not right, but it's just, and then they turn out to be turncoats anyway, and then they turn out to be bad guys. So that just makes them even worse. Then you just have a full reason to hate. Now it's just not. It's like, oh no, they got to die.
Well, and it's interesting too, because when we do find out that they're working for the Germans, aka the Nazis,
the Nazis.
then you start to wonder how much of that was, cultural innocence, like, hey, look at this,
Or
versus
acting.
I'm just messing with this guy. Like, we're about to kill all of them, and I hate, black people because they're inferior.
Right.
As he continues to demonstrate, with his language towards Carl Weathers throughout the rest of the movie.
Right.
But it is nice just to see that kind of an ass kicking in the climax. That knife fight was pretty sweet.
Weaver gets a chance to get that pound of flesh for sure.
But he also gets his ass handed to him too. And I was pleasantly surprised to see him, hanging out on top of that mountain with Miller to watch the dam explode. I thought for sure that because I think he's like, one of the shots we see him lying there, both of his arms have been cut up. He might have been stabbed in some other place, but he's just kind of lying there in the field. I think his eyes were open. I'm like, holy shit. But things worked out.
And again, we're not trying to hang on it too much, but it just for a World War II film to put this kind of a subplot theme in it was surprising in a very good way. It kind of refreshed. I'm like, because World War II films, a lot of us aren't used to seeing that perspective. We're all used to seeing either, one, that the entire army was made of white heroes, storming the beach and that, or that everybody was just holly jolly Christmas with one another, but we're talking 70s. We're moving into these other things where we've already had our Nam films where they've shown the reality of war and that. And here, while it is overall a light film, you do still get this kind of this running theme and addressing this issue, which surprised me. So that's why I wanted to talk about, because I love Carl Weathers anyway. I love the performer. I really do. I think he's very talented. And to see him, I didn't even realize he was in it. I just picked Force 10 from Navarone because it was a classic and that it had the name Force in the title. I hadn't actually, so watching this and seeing who's all in it, I'm like, especially when that opening credits, I'm like, oh, and then it was like Carl Weathers. Oh, well, now I'm full in, and to see that his character gets some screen time more than just being another one of the soldiers that help was also nice to see,
Well, what I love about this, and I hope it continues next week. I don't know that you designed it this way. If you did, you're a mad genius. But the three movies we've talked about, Delta Force, Mega Force, and then Force 10 from Navarone, they're all kind of connected. In Delta Force, they had this scene where Chuck Norris is on the motorbike chasing the airplane. We get that same thing in Mega Force. In Mega Force, it was a big deal that Ace Hunter, the reason that he couldn't have his would-be girlfriend, who was more than capable of handling her own, come on that mission is because he's like, we are a well-oiled machine. We have a mission to do. If we have any outsiders coming along in this, it's going to screw things up and endanger the mission. In this movie, Harrison Ford gives almost that exact same speech to his superiors when he's ordered to bring, Miller and Mallory on board. And damn it, the Mega Force, Ace Hunter was right, because he said, lady, stay behind. And then in this movie, Harrison Ford's like, yes, sir. And what happens? 5 minutes in the air, most of his team gets wiped out. There's two of the original crew members, plus Carl Weathers, plus these two stowaways. And you've got Han Solo being asked to smuggle two people going on a secret mission up against the evil Empire in his ship.
Yeah, I caught that parallel as well. I'm like, wow, okay. Apparently Harrison Ford didn't exactly said this wasn't exactly the film for him. He was he's like, there was some honest people, there was some good performances, but he felt like he was not necessarily the right choice for the film. I thought he worked in this film.
I thought he was great. I don't know. It's kind of like how John Cusack for decades disavowed Better Off Dead. I'm like, you're on crack, buddy. Yeah, this is a wonderful movie. I think even if I didn't just like giggle inside every time an extra from Star Wars or Raiders, an Indiana
Yeah.
Jones movie popped up somewhere in the periphery of the cast, it would still be a hell of a film. But fortunately, we do have a lot of those cameos, like Schroeder, the guy who played like the main Nazi captain showed up. He was the main Nazi captain in Last Crusade. I'm like, this is perfect.
Yeah, it's like Spielberg borrowed from this cast list. He's like recommending either to Lucas or just pulling him for his own films.
And in both films, the last time you see the actor Michael Byrne, he's going over a cliff in a vehicle.
He's going over a cliff in a vehicle. Yeah, I mean, this has got a little bit of Dirty Dozen in it. I mean, it's got a little bit of everything in it. I found a lot of charm in this film. It's at times it gets a little heavy, but not too heavy. And we've got Franco Nero as the character of Lescovar, who was fantastic in this.
And today, if I am to believe Austin Trunick on Twitter, author of the Canon Film Guide, soon to be Volume 2, today is Franco Nero's 80th birthday.
Yeah, 80th birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday, Franco.
Happy
if he's still alive. I hope this isn't one of those things where like he would have been 80. We're just gonna say
he would have been
tense.
80. He would have been 80. I think I don't know if he passed. No, he's still alive. So there you go. But Franco Nero plays a wonderful role as Lescovar, who is the original character that Mallory and Miller were sent to kill. Yes, folks, spoiler room. Come on. They were sent to kill. That's why they're tagging along with Barnsby and his crew, who were sent in to blow up the bridge. Obviously, Miller and Mallory and Barnsby don't know their own missions originally. They didn't tell each other because even though they're allies, they're on their own missions, and but eventually it all comes out, and they tell that they're there to kill Lescovar. Well, when they run into the actual partisans, they say, "Oh yeah, that guy, Nikolai, aka Lesko, he was posing as the real Lescovar. This is the real Lescovar, and he was posing as it, and we killed him months ago." And they're like, "Oh, well, there goes our mission." And I love that part too. Here we have this group, and Barnsby's guys get annihilated on the plane getting to where they're supposed to go. So he lost most of his force. So they're supposed to blow a bridge that's indestructible. And it's like, oh, I don't have the equipment I should and everything. These guys now supposedly at this point in the movie have lost their target. So these guys are kind of in limbo with the partisans who are trying to stop the Germans from crossing this bridge. And where I was going is later on, we soon discover, and we're like, it's Franco Nero. Of course, he's still the double agent. There's no way that he's a good guy throughout this film. Of course, we discover later on that he's the double agent. I loved this character.
I did too, especially because even though he's, the bad guy, he's not an all-powerful bad guy. He still has to work things out and get himself out of some pretty sticky situations and deal with moments where his plan doesn't, work out. Especially the big thing with the train at the end. They go to this, they infiltrate this kind of weapons depot. Miller goes in. Was he with Mallory at that point? Who was he with?
Miller and Mallory were together at that
when they're
point.
Picking up the mines. Those
because they knew how to dismantle the plastique in them and actually put them in bags rather than have them in mines.
Right. So they're in there doing their thing. Meanwhile, Barnsby and some other folks, or there are some people on a train. They all kind of get to reconvene in this train. And Miller is getting ready to assemble, these explosive devices while the train is like the cars are like kind of bucking and stopping and starting.
Connecting and back and forth. Yeah.
Franco Nero's character ducks out and he's like, "Oh, there's a Nazi guard coming. I got to go talk to him," because he's the one person in the group who speaks German, of course. When he gets out, he locks the train car, goes over to the Nazi guy and says, bring the guys around the corner, bring them. I've got everybody in the train. It's locked up. Just go collect them. And then the guy goes around to get his friends, and the train starts to move and it starts to run away. So in that moment, Franco Nero's character is like, well, the Nazis aren't hauling ass the way I'd hoped they would, and the train's leaving. So what do? Oh, I'll go get back on the train and try and get back in the train and say, oh no, the Nazis are coming. And he almost gets away with it too. And there's also this wonderful little tag, that whole scene where the Nazis start running, and there's one of the partisans or the force members, whatever, bringing up the rear. He grabs the machine gun and just mows all of them down. But then as he's going to catch, it's just like it's a tag on top of a tag. As he's running and he's just about to catch the train, one of the Nazis like comes up from the pile. He's just barely alive, and he shoots the guy in the back, and he's dead.
Yeah. So the guy, but he bided our heroes enough time to get away on the cart, and all of this comes together and plays out, and you're like, well, shit, the turncoat's still on the train. And he states that, oh yeah, this train goes nonstop to Sarajevo. And then it kind of falls apart for his character in a beautiful scene, which I don't care. I know Harrison Ford said he was. It's actually the same guy who brought us Remo Williams, folks. Okay, he and a number of James Bond films. A wonderful scene where they think that's it. They're going to Sarajevo. Nazis are going to be right there. They're going to be captured. They're not going to be able to take out the bridge now to stop the armor from getting across the bridge and basically annihilating what the partisans have been trying to do in the country. But then it clicks with them, and Harrison Ford's Barnsby has a beautiful conversation with Franco, to where it's one of those conversations to where they know, the bad guy knows that the good guy knows that the jig is up, but they're having this casual conversation as if still putting up the face, but at the same time everybody knows. And I love the tension and the weight of that scene.
Well, Ford and Shaw are just so wonderful in that confrontation with Nero, because they're kind of talking to him. They've got him over in the corner of this train, and one on either side of them. And as they're the charade is dissolving, just watching both actors' faces, you can just wonder. It put me in that situation. Like, part of me is talking, part of me is gearing up for a fight. Like, what are they thinking in that moment? They're thinking, at what point is he going to reach for something? At what point do I have to start scrapping? Does everybody have my back? Is this going to work out? Is this the moment where I'm going to die? Because as much as Franco Nero's character is outnumbered, he's still not someone to be messed with.
Right. They know he's still the rattler, ready to strike or whatnot. But Nero plays this as well, just in his facial expressions as they're having the conversation, to where he's got a very confident look, like, well, yes, it's just, it's sad that we won't be able to blow and they're having a conversation. Then when Barnsby goes, well, I saw the guy salute you, though. For your rank, he shouldn't salute you. And Franco does a wonderful thing with his face where he doesn't say, his voice is calm, but his eyes show fear. It's a beautiful scene. And I know, folks, we're making but it is. You watch this scene and it's like, there's weight that you want for this scene. Performances by everybody is solid for this basically turning point in the film. And you just feel that tension. You're there with him. And you see the fear in his eyes at first. And then you see the confidence come back in his face, like, yeah, well, I have a commanding presence. So yeah. He just, I love that last minute excuse of, yeah, I have a commanding presence.
And then there's the whole thing about you also didn't mention that the bridge is only a half mile away. We could walk it. He's like, I forgot. It's a bridge. Half mile. I forgot. But when he dies, his last moments, because Harrison Ford shoots him, you see that expression on his face, that kind of surprise and sadness. His eyes are kind of watery. It's not a big dramatic, I'm going to take you out with me, or he doesn't die cursing everybody. He dies like a human being. who just it just didn't quite work out, and you almost wonder if at some point there's some modicum of relief given what he's had to do
Hmm.
ostensibly to survive during this war. We didn't talk about the big scene that led up to this and really underscored the danger that the rest of these characters were in. There is a drop point, a supply drop that was supposed to happen in these woods with the partisans and all these people like lined up to receive this. I guess a ship, an allied ship, was going to fly overhead and drop
And drop,
supplies,
yeah.
munitions, and things.
It's always a dangerous thing for them because they have to let the plane know where they are in the middle of the night. But
Right.
at the same time, right? Yeah, that's why they said these things hardly ever go right.
Right, and so it's a bunch of Russians because they were, teamed up
Mhm.
with the, with the Brits and all that to fight the Nazis, and that didn't quite work out after the war so much, but for the
No.
time being, it was okay. But you've got all these Russians, and they're standing there like making a makeshift runway, holding torches. It was just like this beautiful kind of idea until it turns to instant horror because the supply ship turns out to be a gunship, a Nazi
Bomber, yeah.
plane and just like wipes everybody out and starts dropping bombs. And there's like casualties and explosions everywhere. But right before the attack, Barbara Bach's character, Maritza, who we haven't talked about, she's the daughter of the head of the Allies. She's running reconnaissance, hanging out with the essentially the Nazi sympathizer villagers.
She's being a double agent.
Yes.
Yeah, which is funny because she was supposed to be the partisan, but then they were not partisans. They were I forgot the name of them, but they were allied with the Germans. But then you find out, no, she actually is a part. It's like
Yeah.
agent. It's like I
Yeah.
love that character, but yeah, she's the one that discovers Leskovar.
Yeah, out in the woods
Mhm.
communicating to these forces. And when she runs away, he just shoots her straight in the back. And then right after that, the strike happens. And then the cherry on top of this tragedy, and this is where I knew that, Nero's character was one of like the most devious badasses I've ever seen in a movie. He comes stumbling out of the woods carrying Maritza's body like, oh, darn, she was killed by those monsters.
By
Like, you
by
son of
those
a bitch.
dang planes. Yeah, it was cold. It's like, wow, you just shot her and then you just bring her body out as if, oh no, it wasn't me. Wow, look who I found out in the woods. Shot. Uh Darn.
But it's brilliant because if he had just come stumbling out of the woods,
Without her,
they could
yeah.
have been, hey, where were you during this whole thing?
Yeah. Yeah. So it was a great, spin with his character. And that's why I found all the characters in here really interesting, actually. Even, the leader of the partisans in that area. This guy gave very little shits about protocol. He's like, yeah, oh sure, London, sure, they're gonna send supplies. They never send supply. He's like, you guys are living in a dream world. Us guys out here in the sticks aren't getting any help whatsoever.
Well, it's interesting because it's a perspective, I haven't seen a whole lot of in war
Mhm.
movies. The everyday reality of being in these fights, especially
Yeah.
pre-information age warfare. It made me wonder, like, are there still spies and people running around blowing stuff up by hand and like these little alliances and things going on? I mean, I'm sure there are in some parts of the world, but it's just amazing to think, wow, people actually had to do this. This was like their
Yeah.
vocation. It was very dangerous stuff. But what I liked was this whole idea of the breakdown of communication.
Mhm.
The whole idea of the Nikolai character, whether or not that story turned out to be bullshit, it was a plant from Nero to, further cover his tracks as the actual spy. But it's
Mhm.
completely believable that the person that these two guys got an assignment to come out and kill someone who had already been dead for 2 months because
Yeah.
information travels really slowly. You look at the dam, when we see inside the dam,
Mhm.
and even the munitions factory, you've got, they're Nazis, right? But they're just people in like gray jumpsuits, like polishing equipment and making, driving trucks and making sure they're just like factory workers. And you just wonder about like Yeah, that when we think about Nazis, it's not all just like people guarding camps. It's regular folks doing menial, labor under this, horrible regime.
Right. They're doing it so they don't get shot, killed, or put in a camp. They may very well be just doing this. I mean, it's a job and it's keeping them fed
And alive. It's the whole
and
just following
alive.
orders excuse. But you
Right.
also, yeah, when you think of, that time period, you get this idea that everyone was like these
Oh
frothing at
yeah.
the mouth like demons. And that's not to let anybody off the hook, but it's also the reality of human beings,
Yeah. There were innocents or those who did whatever they had to do to survive, which if that meant I work for the Nazis in their warehouse loading mines into a train and that's my sole job and that's keeping food in my belly, okay, where am I going to go? This isn't, like you said, this isn't a time where there's a lot of different transportations or modes of communication or anything. That's it.
Well, but it's also, why, and I don't want to get too political, but when people talk about, nowadays, they're like, oh, you got to punch a Nazi. I'm like, it doesn't work like that. The big evil threats are more insidious than, it's not like a superhero movie where you've got like the superpowered bad guy and you go take up arms against them. It's like these everyday little evils that you have to fight, and it's not always easy to stand up to that kind of power, or to
Yeah.
be the one person in the crowd to stand up and say, I don't like the way you guys are treating the Jews.
Yeah. Well, and even some of them showed a little fear when the soldiers were getting angry. They were, some of the workers in that, they were kind of like, oh shit, they were just like, because was it we had Mallory and Mallory and Miller were in the warehouse dressed as Nazis, but they don't know a lick of German. Which again was actually kind of refreshing for a World War II film where not everybody was bilingual to know their enemy. I mean, we've run into that with a lot of films to where there's at least one or two people that understand like 8 different languages or whatever, so they could talk to just about anyone they run across to in the countryside. No one here understood German except the one double agent guy could speak and understood German.
Well, to that point, there's also the scene where Harrison Ford is driving. I think he's trying to get through a checkpoint,
Yeah.
and maybe it's the munitions thing. And there's the guy at the gate like yelling at him, and then Harrison Ford just goes, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," and he just drives through. It kind of speaks to that same breakdown of protocol that we were just talking about a minute ago with the head of the partisans. It's like in other movies, it'd be the idea like, oh, you can't talk to your commanding officer like that. They're gonna suspect something and pull you out of the truck. You get the idea that, yeah, these guys have to deal with asshole truck drivers all the time too. I'm not gonna court martial him. He's just gonna go in and then fuck off.
Just let him go. Fine. We needed the truck to go, so it goes. So mission accomplished there. Yeah. There's a number of breaks away from what we're normally used to seeing in film like that, but we get this wonderful segment near the end though, where all our heroes, the surviving heroes that we have, which is far less a smaller number than what we started with, get to blow up the dam because they realize the bridge is indestructible. Miller goes, if I got maybe 8 hours and a lot of explosives and some peace and quiet, never mind the German regime that's under at the base of the bridge to block protect the foundation. He's like,
and a bunch of lights to work through the night.
Lights. He's like, maybe I could blow it. So they decide to use water to wash out the ground this is actually kind of a cool strategy to wash out the ground from underneath the indestructible bridge. And so our heroes go on basically what they feel is going to be a suicide mission. And again, this was another instance where you realize after it's brought up, you're like, oh, but at the time you're like, well, shit, because Barnsby and Mallory, Robert Shaw and Ford, make their way into the dam while Miller is distracting them with a faux firefight with explosives like fireworks. And they put the explosives out, they blow the dam. But Ian, what happens with the dam the minute the explosives go off because they figure this is the end. We don't have enough time. We're not going to escape the explosion. We're done for.
Well, that's the thing. I want to offer a brief correction. They don't
Mm.
consider this to be a suicide mission.
Well, no.
They've got it timed out. It's going to be
Yeah.
close because I think they said that the German convoy is going to be coming across the top of the dam at 5:30 a.m.
Oh, the bridge, at 5:30, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They get there at like 3:30, so they map it out like 20 minutes to get down there, an hour to set it up, and all this other stuff. So they figure it's going to be close, but we can get out of there.
Mm-hmm.
By the time they set everything up, Miller and Mallory look at the watch, and it's like the Germans are late, which is kind of odd because it's like 5:35. They're like, oh, well, they're probably actually like right above us right now. So, or they're coming across the bridge, further down, right? So we don't have any time. So they said, well, what do you think? 20 seconds? Sure, 20 seconds. So they set the clock, and then they walk, and then dramatic countdown, and then nothing happens.
Yeah, there's explosions.
There's an explosion, but it's not something that takes the whole dam down. You're right. I forgot there is an explosion. Yeah. They kind of wake up in, they got some, gray soot on them or whatever, but then they realize to their mind, it didn't work. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, oh my God, what's going to happen? We've seen this 1,000 times in movies. The first explosion doesn't work. So someone has to go and disconnect the blue wire from the red or some nonsense.
Go ahead. Sorry.
But then you cut to outside, and Miller and Weaver are watching what's going on. And Weaver's flipping out because he's like, it didn't work, you son of a bitch. You're so stupid. And how can no one should have trusted you in the first place. And Miller's just sitting there like patiently kind of smiling like, hold on, old boy. It's fine. Just wait. There's a line, and I've got it written down here. You have to let nature take its course. Give it time. It'll work. Yes, that's what he says.
Yeah.
And sure enough, some German workers come down to inspect what happened in the dam because they heard something.
Yeah.
And right as they get down there, they notice there's water leaking from some of the bricks, and then some of the bricks are kind of pulling apart, and then there's a rumble and another rumble. It's just like that small little burst set everything off, but there was a time delay, and then Ford and Shaw are like, let's get the fuck out of here, and they run right past the other guys like, you should come with us, and they're like, what?
It's a great moment. It's a wonderful, serious, climactic moment, but at the same time added just a little humor because they're hiding this alcove. They're ready. You're thinking it's going to be a shoot type thing, and they let these workers go, and then as they realize that the bridge, they're like, you guys better get out of here. And they just run in full English. They're just gone. And the workers are just like, huh? Oh, shit. And they're running too. There's nobody who's an enemy here. They're just all people trying to escape the dam, which does eventually break.
It does. And then, a lot of this looked like it was, miniature model work. Very well done. But, there was some intercutting between that. You get to see the dam break. But then you see they take their time with this, the water making its way down the valley towards the bridge. I love it because the Germans on the bridge, they've got their whole convoy and tanks and trucks and stuff coming across it. They realize, oh shit, this, we got to get off this thing. And they go through, they start running in one direction, but then there's, I believe the Allies are there with machine guns to block that direction. So they get stuck, and then it just starts swaying. I was disappointed that we didn't get some great scenes of close-ups of the German soldiers toppling off with their tanks and equipment. But we would have seen that today. But for 78, they did enough. They stretched their budget pretty thin, I'm sure. But yeah, it was just such a satisfying climax. But I'll let you talk because I've been rambling. But I do want to talk about the very end of this movie, which was just brilliant, I thought.
I love the miniature work. It's 78, so they could only show so much. We do get to see some tanks fall off the bridge. You do get the rocking of the bridge, and what really helps make this scene is we had the leader, as we mentioned before, of the partisans. I think, is that Petrov? I think that was Petrovich. I think it was
Petrovich.
played fantastically by Alan Battle, Badel. I hope I pronounced it right. Anyway, he's a veteran actor as well. Lots of familiar faces in here, but he comes out, and this is a guy who was like, yeah, this bridge is indestructible. He's figuring his guys will put up a fight, but we're not going to be annihilated by this armor. And the joy across his face as he watches that bridge start to shake is the most pure joy I've seen out of character. Like he's like, oh yeah. He's like,
Well, but it's got a double meaning too, because
sure.
his daughter, he just found out like a few hours ago, had been murdered in this attack.
Yeah.
And you could see in the scene where they kind of reconvene in the bunker, he's just totally despondent. He's got this 1,000-yard stares. Other people are kind of talking around him, and then they kind of engage him. He's like, what's the point?
Yeah.
So yeah, when he's watching that bridge come down, it means that the greater good, of course, is going to be served, but he's also hasn't wasted his years out setting this whole thing up, and he hasn't wasted his daughter's life, which I'm sure was a big conversation earlier on.
Oh yeah. It brought some justification and meaning to the sacrifices that had been made by a lot of people to a guy who throughout most of the film staying the course, even though he feels, you could tell, and he alludes to it through his motions and his voice acting for sure, the tone of his voice, that they're on an impossible mission that's probably not going to end well for him, but he's still putting up the good fight to the very end, regardless of never getting support from London, never really being forgotten kind of out there almost in a way, but yet he's still got that touch of duty to him, to where I'm going to do what I'm out here to do, even if it's inevitable we're going to fail.
Well, and that's the interesting thing about it's almost the flip side of what we classic when you hear the phrase, and I think I just used a little bit ago, just following orders, we always associate with the Nazis, right? Largely, I think, because they lost. I mean, when you look at something like Force 10 from Navarone, and you've got Petrovich, he was following orders, no matter what.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that, he was constantly bashing London and headquarters, and no one knows what they're doing, and they're stupid, and their orders misinformation. He still carried on. He didn't give up or abandon his post or desert or anything like that. He just was a good soldier to the very end, which just shows there's two ways to look at this situation.
That scene, now I just realized while you were talking, sir, you sparked my brain. That's what you do. You spark, or maybe I had a stroke. I don't know.
Either as long as you weren't falling asleep, because
I wasn't falling asleep. I may have had a minor seizure. I don't know. But in any case, a little synapse actually fired in my brain. What was very similar to that scene of the bridge collapsing with the water and his look of relief reminded me of the captain in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, who smiled when they blew the bridge finally, that he and his forces had been going back and forth for months, just losing guys on this fairly not insignificant bridge, but at the same time was just both sides were just losing guys left and right. And our man with no name and his buddy, they blow the bridge, and before he dies, that captain smiles at just the overall pleasure that bridge was blown, because he couldn't do it because his commander said they needed the bridge, but the cowboys could do it, and he got that relief. And that's what this scene reminded me of, was the guy, having that relief of seeing the bridge blow and go,
yeah, again, I don't know why this movie isn't more talked about or highly regarded. I guess it doesn't help if one of the stars disavows it, but that last scene where you've got Weaver, Miller, Mallory, and Barnsby alive up on that top of that, kind of like in a forest
hill,
area. Yeah. They're all celebrating, getting ready to bust out the champagne, and Mallory's like, well, yeah, it's great, just a few problems. We're behind enemy lines, we don't have any weapons, we've got a ton of like really salty Germans that are headed our way, and I think there was a fourth thing.
Yeah.
It's like it's a really long. It's we're probably not gonna be able to make it, to safety. And then like everyone else is just kind of like, oh. And then the camera just like kind of pans out as they get up. He's like, well, let's start walking. And then it's like, that's the end of the movie. It's deliciously ambiguous because it's almost like they're leaving it open for another movie.
Sure.
But then you're like, I don't know if these guys are actually going to survive. Does this count as a happy ending?
Well, especially for Weaver, because I mean, he's all cut up. He's feeling a little better, but he's still cut up, and everybody else has been through the ringer. I mean, Mallory and Bardsby, it had stones explode around them. I mean, these guys are kind of beat up.
Yeah, they're concussed for sure. I'm sure they just want to like lay down and take a nap, but now they've got to run for their lives to the woods.
Yeah, I loved how that ended too. It's like, hooray, and we don't end on the hooray part because he's like, yeah, we're kind of literally up a creek,
But it still has that kind of cheeky, like,
playfulness to it, yeah,
upbeat music to it, and yeah, it's like, come back next week.
it part of you is like, well, they're probably not going to make it, but a good chunk of you too is like sitting there going, well, you know what, they might if they really move, and these guys are resourceful, so it's kind of hard to say. But yeah, it was far better than I thought it was. I just kind of picked it because I saw, the name and one or two people, but I didn't realize who all was in this. And it's surprising. I'm like, this is a solid film. It really holds up still. I mean, even Barbara Bach's character, who at first you think is just going to be another like Ilsa of the SS type of character, because when we first meet her, she's just so hardcore. And then there's a scene where she just mows down a bunch of Germans. It's just like, and then she goes to Bardsby and go, hit me. And Bardsby's like, what? You just saved us. And she's like, look, hit me. And he hits her. And she's like, harder.
And then Shaw comes in. She's like,
Shaw just, he wastes no hesitation from him. He just got a clock. But I loved her character too, because she's a spy, a double agent, and she's a strong character actually in this film. For what brief times we get to see her, she's facing some she gets the snot kicked out of her by Drazik actually at one point, once he realizes what's going on and suspects her to be a double agent, and they still get her, but it wasn't, I didn't feel like exactly the damsel in distress thing. It was more like we're saving a comrade type of deal, which I liked.
Yeah. I like the fact that this is a PG movie from 1978, meaning that we still get breasts.
Yes.
We get a decapitation, Mark. We get a full-on decapitation. Not like cutting away or anything. It's like, wow.
Yeah, our guys are resourceful. They don't want to, there's a convoy coming by and they need to get into this is just before the train scene where they're trying to get into the depot. So in order to take over a truck, instead of, ambushing the entire convoy, they let most of it go away until one of the armored trucks with the guys standing up, just, like we normally see the traditional guy, the captain or whatever, standing in the cockpit, standing up very confidently, and they pull a wire across the road and decapitate. I'm like, that's different.
I thought there was gonna be like it was gonna run into like the grill of the tank, because when they pull the wire across, the vehicles are like in the background, and I'm thinking, how are you gonna stop a tank with a tripwire? Oh, because it's much higher than we thought.
It's much higher than we thought. And they pull an old ghost ship in a fantastic, it plays out wonderfully. It's just like, oh, that's how they.
And score one for a ghost ship reference. I love that opening scene.
Hey, thank you. It's been a while, but there you go. So
almost 20 years.
But yes, Force 10 from Navarone. I think we'll wrap it up here. It's not exactly your standard World War II film, but considering it was made in 78 and it wasn't a Vietnam film, it's very surprising that they even decided to pull the trigger, no pun intended, on this movie in 78. This was the last movie completed by Robert Shaw. He unfortunately passed during his last film, the Avalanche movie, unfortunately. But everybody puts in a solid performance in here, and I think it holds up and should be seen. What about you? Final thought with this film?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a wonderful movie. It's funny, it's dramatic, it's exciting. I mean, it's a great adventure movie because, yeah, again, these characters, nothing quite goes their way. They have to keep finding their way out of these increasingly hairy and unpredictable situations, but it feels very organic. It doesn't often feel like someone was sitting there like writing a script. It just felt like, well, this just happened. It comes off like your great grandfather or whatever telling you war stories about what happened, because a lot of unbelievable things happened during this time. Yeah, it's wonderful.
And the characters are balanced. In some films like this, like a headline or something, they're like the main leader or whatnot. But there's an even power, whatever you want to say, power dynamic, or just an even dynamic across all these characters, to where you don't have the dun, 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 hero type leader or commander. Like you said, any plan these guys come up with never goes quite right, even to the point of Barnsby and Mallory thinking they escaped their captors, being tailed by two guys in masks, killing them, only to find out, oh yeah, those guys are actually partisan spies too that you killed. But no one really holds it too hard against them either at the same time. But I never got the gist that like any one of these characters is supposed to be like the guy on the mountain, light, hero type. Like we do get in some, even though you have the cast of characters, one or two are the guys you root for and who are got the plot armor going on. This one, I think what led to the tension of the films and why it holds up is, especially after you see a good chunk of the Force 10 get annihilated on the plane, you realize just about anyone could die at any point in this film with these characters, because you're never given the impression that one has the plot armor for the most part. Barnsby and Mallory and Miller and Lescovar and even Weaver and Dre, they all get moments and whatnot to where you're like, I'm not sure who's actually going to live at the end of this movie.
Well, because there was, and I don't have him here, but there was one. There was like the one guy who was Barnsby's like second in command. He was also in Star Wars. One of the X-Wing pilots. He makes it through a good chunk of this movie. Yes. And you think like, oh, it's going to be him and Barnsby at the end, kind of like the buddies. And, he gets taken out. I love that Schroeder, the Nazi commander, he just gets, shot by mistake by one of his own soldiers during an escape. There's no, like, he's not a Bond villain. He's just a guy. And that's the thing is, this shows the senselessness and the randomness of war. What you're talking about, the most of Force 10 getting taken out on that plane, the Nazi planes come around and they start shooting, and you see the bullets like ripping through the walls of the hull of the plane, just like taking some people out and like narrowly missing others. You've got them ready to parachute, and Harrison Ford is going to like try and check and see who's coming with them, and you realize that just this pile of dead bodies with parachutes on, like it's heartbreaking, but it just feels very real.
Yeah, it does. It does feel real, and I like the fact that you're not quite sure who's going to survive at the end. I mean, that the where we mentioned where the bridge blows up, where they set off the explosives, they played for a little while, and you fully expect the way the rest of the film went, they're dead. Yeah, I mean, and you accept it, and you're just like, okay, well, how are they going to fix this now? Because those two, Ford and Shaw are dead, and you fully accept it. It's like, oh wait, no, they're not. And I liked that, because it wasn't like I was expecting them to survive the explosion the way they play it. And it's handled very well. And yeah, I folks look past the year 2000 for films. Uh, is it a perfect film? No, but it definitely has a lot of things going on for it for a late 70s war film that takes place during World War II. That's a sequel to a movie that came out like 10, 15, 12 years beforehand. It's like, wow, it kind of goes along with what we were talking about, like you've got the sequel now with, shows you Hollywood's been doing this for a while with sequels to where no distance of time will take a sequel off the board if they can do it. And this one I think holds up, and yeah, you should watch it. So there you have it, folks. Force 10 from Navarone. You can see it on Tubi or on Pluto if you got to deal with the commercials, but it's on there for free.
I rented this from Amazon this morning,
Or
and
you could do that too.
well, no, but here's the thing. I just went to see if this is on Blu-ray,
Uh-huh.
and it is, and it's actually on sale right now. But there's a green stream now with Prime Video button. So I don't know if that's from when I rented it this morning,
It
or
might
if
be yet,
or
yeah.
if somehow I just paid for it when I didn't need to.
No, it probably was a rental. No, I mean it's worth a rental too. You don't get the commercials because trust me, if you watch it on Pluto, you'll see about the same 5 commercials about half a dozen times, including the Macy's Day Parade, which I know far more than I need to know about the 95th annual Macy's Day Parade and the balloons that are going to be in it. Thank you, Pluto TV. But I watched it. But yeah, it's worth a watch, folks. It's fun. It's got familiar faces, especially if you're fans of movies of that time. It's got like a who's who of that time in the movie.
It's 6 Degrees of Harrison Ford, specifically for Star Wars and the Indiana Jones movies. It's weird.
It is weird to see how many of these folks were in other films with the same actors later on. It was crazy to see them all together. So, and Carl Weathers, who you normally, I'm sure many people are familiar with The Predator. It's fun to see him in one of his earlier roles, quite a bit. So thank you so much for listening. As always, folks, thank you to our listeners who are ever growing. We are small but mighty, and I appreciate every single one of you out there for tuning in and listening. And now we have our place where it's a license to shill for Mr. Ian Simmons. But stay tuned, folks. Don't just drop out, because one, you need to hear all of the good stuff that Ian does. And we will be announcing tonight the films we will be covering for Horror of 1988. Yes, our special series for next year. I am closing the polls now because I don't think it's going to change in the next 8 hours. So I've got the list here of the 12 films from 1988, horror films that we will be covering. But first, license to shill. Please, Ian, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. I'm Ian Simmons. I run Kicking the Seat, which you can find at kickseat.com. You can read my 3,358 word review of Ghostbusters Afterlife if you have nothing better to do or don't love yourself. You can also find me on YouTube at Kicking the Seat, where I also did a video review of that movie with David Fowley of Keeping It Real. We do, interviews and reviews and all sorts of fun stuff several times a week there. And Wednesdays, beginning tomorrow night, Thanksgiving Eve, we're going to be going back to our weekly live streams, talking about a Disney Plus Marvel series. This time it's Hawkeye, our new series, Hawk Talk. And Mark, are you going to join us for this?
I don't know. I have to see. I may be going to a movie with my son tomorrow if my wife is kind enough to let me spend some time with my son, because she's been missing her son for quite some time. So it's going to be a little tough, and I completely understand. But if I don't go to a movie,
let her have him from 8:30 until 9:30, or go to a 10 o'clock movie. Resident Evil, you can watch at any time of the day.
I could probably watch it at any time of the day, yes, but I will try, because they're premiering 2 episodes tomorrow, is it? For everyone,
1 and 2,
or is it just 1 and 2? It's not just critics who get 1 and 2. They aren't like the rest of you elitists. No, just kidding.
Well, I can say it'll be an interesting talk, because I know some people who love it and some people are like, it's not great. I'm in the love it category. But stay tuned, because I have some thoughts about the source material, which I think is going to definitely get some people mad at me on the show. But that's tomorrow at 8:30 p.m. Central over on YouTube, / kicking the seat, I guess.
And when this is posted, if you don't catch it, you can still catch it because it's archived, because it's still out there even after they record it live for you to view for your viewing pleasure. And now, horror of 1988. Yes, folks, this went well last year. We did the Canon poll, and that was great. And we ended up doing more Canon films than I expected. And I suspect next year we're going to do more horror films than just these. Probably not a whole year of horror, but there's going to be probably a bevy of horror films, kind of like there were a bevy of Canon films this year, just because I'm like that. But here we are, folks, starting from the ones who got the least vote out of the top 12. This is the top 12 results. We had like 25 movies listed. This is the top 12 that got the most votes. So, number 12, Black Roses. Number 11, Dead Heat. Number 10, Fright Night Part 2 from 1988, folks. Number 12, 11, 10. Number 9, The Lair of the White Worm.
I've never seen that. I'm excited to see that.
8, Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. 7, Rabid Grannies. 6, Waxwork. 5, Cheerleader Camp. 4, Night of the Demons. Number 3, which was a surprise, Maniac Cop with Robert Zadar.
Why is that a surprise?
Well, that it was at number 3. I knew it would
okay.
be in the top 12. I was surprised at how high it was. Number 2, Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. And the big surprise, which ended up coming up number 1, which wasn't for a while, Night of the Demons was up there for quite a bit, Pumpkinhead. So yes, folks, yes. Oh, it's going to be an interesting year in 2022 as we cover the horror of 1988. Films that were in the running up until this last month of voting were Child's Play and Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, and those got bumped out by the voting, which surprises me. Child's Play was a surprise because, like I said, that was another one that was up there for quite a bit, but there was a last push in voting in this last month of November that kind of pushed it out. But who knows? You might still see it on a bonus episode or whatever.
I was going to say, is that can we do that, or is that cheating?
Yeah, I don't know if it's cheating. I run the programming on the show. I guess I could choose maybe the honorable mentions or something, kind of like we're doing a block of Canon films for December to close out December. Maybe we'll do something in 2022. So there you have it, folks. There's the list. It'll be posted up on the Facebook page for Special Mark Productions and the YouTube, the Special Mark, the Spoiler Room page for this podcast. So thank you very much, folks. I've rambled enough. Hope you're excited. I am for next year. There will be theme months yet because Ian's convinced me to keep doing these theme months to see what we could come together with. And with them being sequels, we'll probably be watching some other films in these series those months ahead. So stay tuned, folks. Thank you so much. And next week we've got Future Force for our last film for Full Force month here. So thank you so much. And now I would just say a good night, everyone.
Good night.